First of all, I want to thank Florida AIA and as well as everyone that's attending for taking the time to give me the opportunity to present this class to you. I want to start off with a brief introduction. I know that some of you may have seen classes or heard a class or watched a class, whatever, from me from years past, because I've been doing it for about 15 years for Florida AIA. I'm looking to see a question came up, but it's nothing for me. My name is Jim Heiss, and I'll spell it for you in case anyone wants to write it down. I'll give you my contact information. I want you to feel free to reach out to me anytime you have a question, basically on a window or door, and when it relates to building codes. My name is said Jim Heiss. It's Heise. My email address is jheise@mail.com. Not Gmail, mail.com. My cell number is 941-343-7122. So once again, feel free to reach out to me if you need to. And I see they just posted that basically now. I just saw it on the chat box. So let's get started. The one thing I want to point out before I get too far involved is that there's going to be a lot of people in this particular group. There's over basically 100 right now. It's almost impossible to stop 100 times basically and answer a question to try and get done within an hour. So please try and save your questions to the end. If you don't get a chance to answer them, then just reach out to me, either by email or by cell. Text me if you want. All right. So let's get started. This is the title of this is called the Florida Building Code, 8th edition, 2023. Fenestration changes from the 7th edition. Right. The information is down below for obviously for AIA contact information. And let's see. The purpose behind this analysis of changes for the 8th edition of the Florida Building Code is to provide a thorough comparison of the provisions in the 7th edition. All right. And what you'll see in many cases, I'll list them side by side if just some word changes. I'll list the 7th edition right alongside of it, the 8th edition, so you can see what the difference is. It's important to note that the analysis is not intended to replace or interpret the provisions contained in either the 7th or 8th editions. It simply aims to highlight the differences between them. Right? So we're going to talk about interpretation issues here coming up. Now, in case you haven't figured it out, the starting date basically was in 12/31 of last year, 2023. It says midnight. I don't know why they do that because there's no building department open on midnight on December 31st. So I generally round it off and saying it starts January 1st, right, of this year. So it is a new code. And as everyone is probably aware, that we have a triannual code process where every 3 years it gets updated. So the next one will basically be in 3 years from now. All right. And it'll say 12/31/2026. All right. So where do I find these? All right, the 8th edition. If you go to floridabuilding.org, you'll be able to get in and link on to any of the books that we're going to be relating to. All right, and be able to find that particular code and the exact verbiage of it. When I talk about these code changes, I try and use the exact verbiage because the verbiage sometimes makes a big difference in how people interpret the code. If you want to see an analysis of the changes, this is pretty awesome. They have, you can go to the floridabuildingcode.org and you'll see an area that says code resources and supplements to the FBC. If you click on that, you then can click on analysis of changes. And what you'll see is they'll have the codes very similar to what I'm showing you, where they'll have the 7th edition and 8th editions, and they'll put the changes in red, so that all the print in red, so that you can actually see these. So they're accessible for you. Makes it very easy that way. So everything I'm going to talk about today that relates to fenestration is going to come out of one of these 4 different books. It's either the building book, which is sometimes referred to as a commercial book. Everyone uses a different terminology sometimes. The residential book, the existing building book really aren't any changes in so much. And the energy conservation, very, very few, or if anything in that you'll see as well also. Almost everything is going to be in the residential book or the building book. Now, we're going to talk about the building book here first. The provisions of this code shall apply to the construction, alteration, relocation, enlargement, replacement, repair, equipment, use, and occupancy. The exceptions are for detached 1 and 2 family dwellings and multiple single family dwellings, such as townhouses, not more than 3 stories above grade. Then you go to the residential book. So generally, I make it simplified and just explain that you can pretty much build under the residential book as long as it's not any more than 3 stories high. Once you go above 3 stories, then you're pushed into the commercial end or the building book itself. Okay. Some of the changes you're going to see during the code the class that we go through is to bring the residential book and building book closer together. In other words, sometimes there'll be a certain code, it'll read differently than it does in the residential book versus a building book. So some of this is to bring things closer together. Provisions of the Florida Building Code residential shall apply to construction to detached 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses, again, more than 3 stories high. No more than 3 stories high. So people will ask me quite often, because I've worked probably for the past 12 to 15 years representing PGT, as well as the FMA and IHPA and other groups that I belong to and I was a board member of. They ask quite often, what do these changes come from? Well, first of all, a lot of them are going to be grammatical changes. All of us who write building codes or help write building codes with the Florida Building Commission, we're not English professors. So there are grammatical changes that we have to correct. There's also spelling corrections. And yes, we all have spell check on our computers, but the English language has a lot of times one word and it can mean or spelled even different ways, and still it can bypass the spell checking. And sometimes it's just a simple punctual corrections, which I'm going to show you on the next slide. Sometimes we have to change the words. An example, and versus or a lot of it's going to be, you're going to, when I get to them, you'll see is clarification for interpretation. We're never going to eliminate misinterpretation of building codes, but we try and each time the tri-cycle comes up, a new code cycle, we try and reword things to try and make it so there may be less misinterpretation, let's say. And then section relocation. We use the ICC as our base code. And if the ICC changes the code, puts it in a different chapter, a different number, then we do the same thing too. All right, so there's consistency. Then we upgrade to the current standards. Now, obviously, standards don't always coincide with building codes, but as a result, we have to change the codes every 3 years to line up with the most current standards. And the newest one that affects the window and door industry right now for this particular code cycle is the ASCE 722. All right, so that does make a little bit of difference in the charts in that you're going to see. And then occasionally we have a brand new code that we'll actually write. Oftentimes we'll get this because of some of our people that have our windows and doors. There might be issues. They say they found a better way to do things, whatever. So we'll actually write a code occasionally as well also. And you'll see that coming up as well. So I said something about punctual corrections. This is how critical it can actually be. All right. So I'm going to go to a slide here. If I said, let's eat grandma, all right, does that mean the exact same thing as let's eat comma grandma? Absolutely not. Right. So it gives you a simple comma can make a huge difference on interpretation thing. So this is why it gets really critical like that, so that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, things of this nature. Now we're going to start off, I am with the residential book, because this is where the majority of the changes that we find in our industry is going to be related to. So everything we're talking about comes out of the 8th edition residential book. Now, this is an example, as I said I was going to do. If you look on the left, you see the 7th edition residential book, right? And it talks about grade floor openings. And it says that the sill height of the opening is not more than 44 inches above or below the finished ground, all right? Well, we had to change that. And it says now what's referred to emergency escape and rescue openings, all right? And then we had to change the location that the bottom of the neck clear opening is not more than 44 inches. The reason being, I put in a diagram down here. If you look at, too many people misinterpreted and thought, well, the sill is right here at the bottom. No, there's like a 1-inch water dam or something on the back. It's to the net clear opening. So that's just an example to try and cut out some of the confusions on a code. So we spelled it out that way. So this makes a good comparison seeing seventh edition and eighth edition. Now, changes to the code definitions. Windborne debris region item 1, the definition has been revised to delete the term coastal and clarify that an exposure D condition must exist upwind of the water line. This is causing a bit of a problem now. I'll explain why coming up here. The net effect is, it says that there are some inland areas, for example, in Florida, areas like Lake Okeechobee. Well, people aren't going to build to, want to call the build to the restrictive requirements for zone D, for exposure zone D along that lake. So there's a movement to try and get that coastal word back in. And I think it's strong enough from what I hear that it may very well happen within a year, let's say. I don't know. I'm just trying to throw something out there. But that's what it says right now. So this is an example again. On the left, where the seventh edition said, within 1 mile of the coastal mean high water line. Somehow it got changed, all right, to within 1 mile of the mean high water line where exposure D condition exists upwind of the water line. All right, so it doesn't say coastal, right? So as a result, there's a lot of concerns that there's areas inland that are going to be considered exposure D and be a lot more expensive to build in because of that. So that's why there's a movement to try and go back to coastal. As I said, the biggest change that we have is results probably from the ASCE 722 maps. They replace the previous ASCE 716. And I know we use a lot of acronyms, and I can't assume that everyone always knows what an acronym means. ASCE is American Society of Civil Engineers, right? We still have the same four maps that we had before. None of that's changed. There's a map for each of the different risk categories. There's categories 1, 2, 3, and 4, as you'll see. The most common one by far that we use is 2. That's for your homes, office buildings, condos, etc. That's why it's the most used category. Now, changes to the code in the residential. Figure 30124 talks about the ultimate design wind speeds. All right. It says wind speeds are unchanged for most of the Florida except for the panhandle, where the wind speeds have increased slightly in some of the areas. So again, we're not, sometimes when we go from one edition to another, it affects one industry a lot more than another one. And we're not seeing a whole lot of changes here you're going to find to the fenestration industry. All right. Someone just asked the question. We'll get that answered a little bit later. So again, you're going to see when the charts are going to change a little bit, but they're not drastic when I show them to you. And where it's going to affect some of the area of Florida is mainly going to be in the panhandle. And I'll explain why a little bit when we get to it here. All right, now this is the chart if you go to table 30122, this has been updated to correlate now to the ASC 722. All right. It only the portion that applies to wind zone, or excuse me, wall zones 4 and 5 are shown. In other words, if you go to 30122, you're going to see it's like a full page long in height because it has zones 1, 2, and 3, which are roofs. If I put that onto this PowerPoint, you'd never be able to see the numbers. So I just cut it down to where windows are related to, which is zones 4 and zones 5. Zone 4 is an interior zone, and zone 5 is an end zone. So these numbers have changed a little bit. So if you've got, if you have a chart, the old chart, you need to get rid of it, put these new tables on, because there are some slight changes in them. Now let's take a look here. The Florida Building Code Residential, the R7034.4 says flashing for exterior windows and door openings. The FMA AMA WDMA 2710 has been added as a reference, as an additional reference code standard for flashing or for sealants for exterior windows and doors. All right, you'll see this on the next slide here. In the 7th edition, it included the 100 to 200 to 250 to 300 and 400. Now that same code, all right, has made a change and added on the FMA AMA WDMA 2710. All right. And they were also added in accordance with the flashing or water resistive barrier. All right, so that wording has changed. So if you go into that one section that I explained earlier, where you can see these changes, and this is what you'll see is they'll highlight in either yellow or red, depending on, I forget which one it is, but it'll actually show the differences side by side like this. So definitions, all right, a little bit of change on definitions. Vertical fenestration changes, fixed or movable, has been changed now to fixed or operable. I don't know why, but some people got confused with movable and operable. So they're actually considered in our industry an operable window, such as a single hung, a horizontal roll, or things of this nature. They're windows or parts of windows that move, right? The height and exposure adjustment coefficients have been updated for consistency with the ASC 722. So when you see these tables, they have been, not drastically, but some of the areas on the tables have been changed. And that's what it spells out on this particular case. It says the height and exposure adjustment coefficients have been updated now. So again, if you have this chart and you use it, if you have the old one, get rid of it and replace it with this one. And it shows that it can make a drastic difference. It's just showing down below from the exposures from B, C, or D. If you're not familiar with these are things that we teach in when I give the actual 2-hour building code class. All right. So if you're looking at a DP plus or minus of 60, for example, and you're going down to a mean roof height of 60 feet, you multiply it by 1.9. So now your design pressures go up to from a 60 to a 7 plus or minus 72. And exposure C, which is an open terrain area, it goes up to 97. And if you're right on top of the water, within so many feet of the water, of a coastal line or whatever now, it can go up to 112. So again, the higher the design pressure, the more expensive the product is. And this is why there's a movement to try and change exposure D to go put the word back into coastal. So it only affects basically the coastal lines. In other words, the Atlantic Ocean or the Gulf of Mexico. Glazing and wet surface areas. This is R308.4.5. It's been revised to clarify walls adjacent to wet surfaces, including bathtubs, showers, etc. They're considered now to be hazardous locations for glazing. There is a new exception to required safety glazing that's been added for laminated insulated glass units where the outboard sacrificial pane is not exposed to any of those hazardous locations. And it's funny, that has been an issue. I've actually had to answer explain that to a couple architects in the past 2 weeks. And this is the difference of it. Glazing in wet areas is the way it's explained in the 7th edition. And then over here in the 8th edition, again, some of the wording changed. And so it says facing or adjacent to hot tubs, saunas, and etc. And down below is the change. It says glazing that is more than 60 inches, measured horizontally from the water's edge of a bathtub, pool, swimming pool, whatever. All right. And then the outboard sacrificial panes and the laminated insulating class unit where the exterior of the unit is not exposed to any of the hazardous locations specified. Right. So this is where the changes are coming in on our 308.4.5. Now, if you're not familiar, when we say a laminated insulated unit, this is an example. What they're saying is that here we have an insulated window. We always start from the outside. So from the outside is where my mouse is. We have a piece of glass, an airspace, and then another piece of glass and the vinyl, and then the third piece of glass. So we have a laminated inboard, which is on the interior, and then we have a airspace. It could be a gas in it, argon gas, whatever. And then sometimes people refer to this as a sacrificial lamb, so to speak, the sacrificial piece of glass that's on the exterior. And so it's explaining that if you're not within a certain distance, this does not have to be tempered, right, at that point. And that's what the code before is talking about. But I just wanted to show you what a laminated piece of glass was. Operational constraints, all right, and opening control devices sections got revised to permit the use of fall prevention devices complying with ASTM F2090 on windows serving for emergency escape and rescue openings. Some people just refer to it as egress, again, terminologies. And here it is in the book. If you look at the 7th edition, and over here on the right, you'll see the 8th edition, where we added the fall prevention devices complying with AF 2090 shall be permitted as well. All right, before it didn't have fall prevention devices, and people would say, well, is that included or not? So now it is. This one refers to the window sill opening heights. All right. Dealing with window fall protection. It says for window fall prevention requirements, this section has been revised to clarify that the measurement is from the finished floor to the bottom of the clear opening and not the sill. Just like a previous code we talked about, because the bottom of a sill could actually have a 1 inch area for water prevention to come in and tall, but it's not the net clear opening. So it's referring to when the window is always open, when it's open in the open area that you have to access it. And this spells it out here. In dwelling units where the bottom of the net clear opening of an operable window is located less than 24 inches above the finished floor and greater than 72 inches above the finished grade. Now this part hasn't changed anything that you see through here versus the seventh edition, except this very first sentence. All right. But here it says the top of the sill. All right. So that's again, that was confusing. People would misinterpret what that meant. Here we're looking at the maximum height from the floor. This is still in the residential book. Height limitation for earls is now based on the distance from the floor to the bottom of the clear opening instead of the sill. So again, we're emphasizing that's the height now. This one here, we're dealing with egress. This one, it says emergency escape and rescue openings shall have the bottom of the net clear opening not greater than 44 inches above the floor. All right. So it's just worded differently than it is over here on the seventh edition. So again, sometimes, as I said earlier, we'll reword a code to help create less of confusion or less of misinterpretation. All right. There's a question that someone put on the distance called out on the code for bodies of water no longer coastal is 5,000 feet. Correct. The mile is 5,280 feet. Is this an error also? Could possibly be. I'm not going to answer that one because no one's ever asked me that. I'd have to double check and confirm everything. But yes, it does say 5,000 feet, right? On the code. It doesn't say 5,280. That I do. I am sure of. I got that. Let's move on. And here's the changes to the code in the residential book. We're talking about garage door wind loads. Now, I don't get involved with garage doors, but a garage door is considered a fenestration product. So if you have a specific question on a garage door, I'll try and answer it or get the answer for you. But sometimes I can't. I'll have to do some researches, only because I've spent my last 20 years in just windows and doors. Here is the ASTM 1996. I should say 22 impact test requirements. I'm sorry, that's a typo. All right. Someone has raised a hand here. Let's take a look. I'm not sure what they're asking, but hang on, and we'll try and get questions at the end because again, there's over 100 people on here, and there's no way I can stop and answer each question and get through with it in an hour's time. So this actually replaces the previous ASTM 1996-16. All right. This is using the ASTM E1996-20. And here's the description for the missiles for B, C, D, and E, as you see through here. And over to the left, it just spells out the small missiles, 10 2-gram steel balls. Missile level C is a large missile. It's a 4.5 pound 2x4 at 40 feet per second. Missile level D is a 9-pound 2x4 shot at 50 feet per second. And then E is a 9-pound 2x4 at 80 feet per second. So this gives you the different wind zones and what's required in that particular area. And I'm going to show you a map where those zones are coming up here very shortly. Changes to the Florida Building Code residential again says that deals with replacement windows. Says condition 3 has been revised to permit the use of fall prevention devices complying with ASTM F2090. Again, it's complementing what we said earlier on the code change. On replacement windows, it says regardless of the category of work, where an existing window, including a sash and glazed portion or safety glazing is replaced, the replacement window or safety glazing shall comply with the requirements of sections AJ 102.4.1 and 102.4.4 as applicable. And this will be showing on the next slide or two here. This one talks about the control devices. adding window opening control devices, otherwise referred to as WOCDs. That's the acronym for it. And fall prevention devices to not reduce the net clear opening of the window unit after operation or release of the control device, allowing the window to fully open. Window open control devices, section revised to also apply the window replacement that includes the sash only when the existing frame remains. Height limitation of 4 inches is now based on the distance from the floor to the bottom. Again, I always say the net clear opening, but of the clear opening instead of the sill to satisfy the fall protection code. All right, so that's again confirming some of the things we mentioned earlier. And this brings it on over here, window control devices. The fall protection devices complying with ASTM 2090 shall be installed when existing windows replaced or all of the following. Again, keep in mind all of the following apply to replacement window, not just one of them. It has to be operable, and it's got to have one of the two applies to it. The window replacement includes replacement of the sash and the frame, or includes the sash only. The bottom of the clear opening of the window opening is at a sill height of 24 inches above the finished floor. The window will permit openings that will allow passage of a 4-inch diameter sphere. I generally refer to that as about the size of a tennis ball, with the windows in its largest opening position in a vertical distance from the top of the sill to the window opening to the finished floor grade surface below on the exterior is greater than 72 inches. So again, it spells it out very clear. All right. I see a question in the chat box. Let's see if I can answer a quick question. Can you type your question in? Okay, that was AIA answered it. Okay, now we'll talk about the building book here. See what some of the changes are related to the building book itself. The definition has been revised for windborne debris regions. All right. The definition has been revised to delete the term coastal and clarify that an exposure D condition must exist upland of the water line. The net effect is that some areas, inland areas, where the wind speed is equal to or greater than 130 and located near large bodies of water with a fetch of 5,000 feet or more, will now be in a windborne debris area. So again, that's the issue that's going to try and deal with. By changing the code like this, again, means some of the areas like along Lake Okeechobee, the homes and that will be a lot more expensive to build using this definition. So that's why I'm saying there's a movement to go back to the word coastal. And that generally when something like that happens, it generally takes about a year for an amendment to come up and change it. So it is what it is for now. It has not been changed. But if I had to use what I call Jim's crystal ball, yeah, I think it'll get changed. There's more than enough support for it. In this section of the code, they talk about the use of sliding doors in nursing homes. Okay. And it says that pocket sliding and folding doors are now prohibited to be used for any occupable room. Sliding doors equipped with sliding door hardware shall not be equipped with a bottom door track and shall be permitted are now only permitted to be used outside of the room. So the new language basically permits the use of manual or powered operated sliding doors used for access to any room located on an access corridor. This is another change that talks about pocket sliding and folding doors are now prohibited for use in any occupiable room. Sliding doors equipped with sliding door hardware and not equipped with the bottom door track shall be only permitted to be used outside of the room again. So again, these are, if you go into the code at floridabuilding.org, and you'll be able to actually see the wording of all of this. It's exactly the same. And when you see the other section where it shows the changes, they're highlighted in red, just like this. More changes to the Florida Building Code building. This one here is for size of doors. The 48-inch maximum width limitation of a swinging door leaf has been deleted. All right. Egress doors types, we'll talk about sections revised to add balanced doors to the types of swinging doors allowed and used in the means of egress purposes. So there's some slight changes in doors, but again, I don't consider anything so drastic. Thresholds. Exception 2 has been revised to specifically permit thresholds at exterior doors of dwelling units or sleepings to be at the height necessary to comply with the water resistance requirements of section 1709.5 table 110.17, which specifies maximum difference between exterior and interior floor levels has been deleted. The window openings, fall protections, the sill height of a window above the floor that would trigger the fall prevention requirements has been changed from 24 inches to 36 inches. This is a fairly big change. And this is done. This is one of those changes that was done to try and coincide with the residential book. Sometimes we had the residential book say one thing and the building book say the other. And so trying to bring some of these things together. Excuse me. And in most cases, when there's a difference between them, the place they'll go is the one that's the most restrictive, which would be the 36 inches. Operational constraints for emergency escape and rescue openings. There's some new language that's been added, permitting the use of WOCDs and fall prevention devices complying with ASTM 2090. All right. The water resistive barriers. There's a section been revised to clarify that fenestration products and other specific flashing components are not considered part of the water resistive barrier. However, there's the exception 2 that has been revised to clarify that in order to qualify for this exemption. The combustible water resistive barrier has to meet both ASTM E1354, ASTM E2404. Getting into flashing here, this again, it's going back, we talked about it in the residential book that they added the FMA AMA WDMA 2710 has been added as a flashing option for exterior windows and doors. This particular code that they're talking about, and we're seeing it more and more enforced now by building departments. I actually had a class that I did for one of the chapters a couple months ago in Florida. And one of the inspectors actually made a comment to everyone to please start enforcing this. We need to have consistency. So this is starting to get pushed a little bit more and more. Again, I can, as I tell people, I can tell you what the code is and where it is, et cetera, but I cannot tell you who enforces it and who doesn't. And unfortunately, this is one of the codes that hasn't been enforced quite a bit. And now the enforcement is starting to progress on it. Risk category buildings and other structures. New occupancy types have been added to risk category 3. All right. Buildings and other structures containing one or more public assembly spaces, all right, each having an occupant load greater than 300 and a cumulative occupant load of these public assembly spaces of greater than 2,500, all right. Buildings and structures containing group I4 occupancy with an occupant load greater than 250 have been added as risk category 3. So just some slight changes is up. And again, they are drastic to a point, but they're not that difficult. Here we're looking at talking about ultimate design wind speeds for risk categories 2, 3, and 4. It says the ultimate design wind speeds have been updated to correlate with ASCE 722. Wind speeds are unchanged for most of Florida, except, as I mentioned earlier, for the Panhandle, where some wind speeds have increased slightly in some of the areas. A new note has been added permitting location-specific wind speeds to be determined using the ASCE wind design geodatabase. And in short, what happened, my understanding is that most of Florida, the majority of Florida has been due to the requirement.
Hey, Jim, seem to have lost your audio. I think you're on mute. There
I
you
didn't
go.
hit it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
How far back did it go?
Oh, 15 seconds.
Okay, well, yeah, I did not touch the mute button on there, so I don't know what it
Mm.
did. It has a mind of
Hey,
its own.
you might want
Okay.
to turn your camera off just to lower the amount of bandwidth you're using. That might help, just in
Uh,
case.
okay.
Or,
Do get on here. I'm trying to find where to see that now. I'm now since I'm
you've
on
got so
this.
many windows open.
Yeah. Here we go. Pause recording. Would pause recording do that?
No,
I think it would. No.
I'd rather not worry about it.
Okay,
If you,
let's not experiment with it then.
yeah. Okay,
Okay.
you're
Wendy,
good.
All right.
I can stop his video.
Okay.
Can you? All right,
Yeah.
please go ahead then.
Okay.
All right, but we can still hear you.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Um, so I'll go back to this on this slide here. We talk about the ultimate design wind speeds have been updated to correlate with ASC 722. As I mentioned earlier, under the residential book, it said that the wind speeds are pretty much unchanged for most of Florida, except some of the areas in the Panhandle. And that's it changed. It made if you're dealing if you're an architect that's dealing in other states, obviously than just Florida, you're going to see some major changes. But for Florida, it's not because our requirements are basically have been above the rest of the country pretty much in reality. And a lot of this is due to well, some of the damages that have been caused by tornadoes. It's the easiest way to explain it. It's sort of that was the reason for the push for this with the American Society of Civil Engineers. But it really didn't affect much of Florida except the very northern part up in the Panhandle, and then only areas of that. But in other states, it's going to make a major change. This is based on 1609.5 tornado loads. All right. The new section adding requirement the design and construction of risk category 3 and 4 buildings and structures to be in accordance with chapter 32, all right, of the ASCE 7 standard. And again, that's basically getting into some of the increased wind speeds and the requirements because of tornado loads. Exterior windows and doors on 1709 5.1. The section was revised to exempt products tested to TAS 202 from the requirements of sections 24032 and 24033. The TAS is a testing application standard that Miami-Dade was requiring, right? In exception 3 regarding structural wind load design pressures for window and door assemblies other than size tested, the AMA 2502 and WDMA IS 11 have been added as acceptable methods for determining ultimate wind speed pressures. So just been a little bit of switch on that. Energy conservation now. This has been, there's very little changes in it. I know that the question always comes up to me is on the new code, are they still going to be allowing that 30% rule type of a deal for energy? And the answer is yeah, none of that has actually changed, right? What you will find is that some of the charts have changed. If you look here in the 8th edition, this is a copy of the chart, the default factor charts. So if you have a list of these in your books that you use, you might want to go back and pull the old ones out and put in these because they have been changed just slightly. Not drastic, but then slight changes. On the commercial energy code, it says the replacement fenestration product adds a new section, all right, a new fenestration product, including sash and glazing, that replaces an existing fenestration unit, must replace or must meet the applicable requirements for U factor and solar heat gain in table C 402.4. And there's an exception, and that's for an area weighted average. It's still allowed. So it says an area weighted average of the U factor of replacement fenestration products being installed in the building for each fenestration product category listed in the table 402.4 must be permitted to satisfy U factor requirements for each fenestration product listed in 402.4. Boy, we should have a tendency to make these sound confusing, don't we? And we keep trying to make them easier to understand. So again, if we want to look at some references on here, it says, where do I find that 8th edition Florida Building Code? Well, it's www.floridabuilding.org. Okay. That's the Florida Building Commission website for it. If you want to see the analysis of these changes, and it'll be changes in everything, not just windows and doors, and all changes, because I know you guys are dealing in a lot of different aspects, roofing, walls, everything else. You can go to the www.floridabuilding.org and look under code resources and supplements to the FBC, as I mentioned earlier. And that will allow you to actually see everything. And it's laid out very similar to what I've done here today, showing the 5th and the 8th edition side by side, or by showing what the word changes are in red print so that you can actually physically see the differences. All right. Now I know you've got some questions. And I know this is we got time. I probably went a little bit quicker on some of this than I should have because I wasn't sure if I was going to have time to answer some of these, only because there's 121 people that are registered and signed up for this right now. So I'll take some questions at this particular point and see if I can answer for you. Joe Esposito says, is the ASCE wind design geodatabase a way to determine actual wind speeds of the project as opposed to defaulting the map values prescriptive? If so, how location specific is it? I'm going to give you, if you have a pencil and paper, Joe, write this down. If you want to determine the actual wind speed for the project or the lot. That is, if you go to engineeringexpress.com. No, I take that back. That's the wrong one. Send me this. If you send this to me, I don't have it. It's a database I can send to you. Text me this question, and I'll send you the website you can go to. And on that website, it basically you can take the mouse from your computer, go down to the lot that you're on, that you're dealing with. It'll tell you the exact wind speed of that particular lot. All right, so that you'll know it has the latitude, the longitude, and the wind speed of it. Okay. So if you text me that question, I'll send it to you. I'd have to leave this session to look that up and to send it to you or to give it to you right now. You mentioned someone else, John says, I mentioned showing us the new maps. Is this possible? The maps are you referring to what? I'm not sure which maps you're talking about. Windborne debris maps, or you're talking about I'm not sure which maps, for so I'm really not quite sure to answer that. But again, any maps that you'll see that we talk about are listed in floridabuilding.org. And you go to the building codes and you'll be able to see and copy and paste them. That's one of the things we made a change on. They did is they allow now people to go into the code books and actually cut and paste. So if you want a map, you can actually cut and paste it and have access printed out yourself. And I think that's a huge addition. They just started that actually in the 7th edition. In the 6th edition, you couldn't do that. All right. Windborne debris, yes. The windborne debris maps have changed very, very slightly. Unless you put the two maps side by side, you probably won't see it. Where it changes the most is the dotted line that shows 1 mile inland. That's the dotted lines have increased a little bit there. But again, going back to Jim's crystal balls, I think you're going to see a much bigger change when it goes to the 9th edition, because on the area of the map where it shows the curve where it goes out to the panhandle, there really is nothing there. But we had a hurricane that came through there recently that actually tore up a lot of damage. So I think you're going to see that dotted line go wrap around there a lot further as well. Someone says, can I revisit and elaborate the exemption note of TAS 201 testing requirement a couple of slides from the end? All right. Let me go back and see if I can find that for you. All right. Let's see. TAS 201. I need to eliminate the question so I can see my screen. No, it's further back. This one here. This is exactly the way it's worded in 1709.5.1, exterior windows and doors. It says the section has been revised to exempt products tested to TAS 202 from the requirements of those other two sections. So they've taken away the requirement for the testing application standard that Miami-Dade has. All right. And then what you'll see is there's down below an exception to it is the AMA 2502 and WDMA IS 11. But that's exactly the way it's worded. And I'm not quite sure why. I don't remember why that was TAS 202 was removed from it. I couldn't tell you. I see chat boxes are all the questions. Can you provide that link here? No, which link are you referring? No, you're going to have to send for links. You're going to have to text me, and then I'll text you back or email me, either one, and I'll send you links. I have to exit this program in order to find those. I don't have them memorized. All right, and then here, question and answers. When they please get from Jim the website for a specific lot wind speed and decimate all attendees. Disseminate open. Okay. Website for specific land. Yes, that's the one. Again, I'd have to leave this program, and so I'll send it to Wendy so that they have it and they can forward it to you. It's the same one that every building department is using. All right. And it what it allows is it allows for interpolation. What do I mean by that? Is that prior to this site I'm going to send you to, if you were say between a 140 and a 150, well, where are you? A 144, a 146, 147? There, that's called interpolation. So this website I'll send you allows for that interpolation. However, do keep this in mind. Interpolation is up to the jurisdiction, whether they want to allow it or not. My understanding is from talking to jurisdictions, about 90% of them or more or better allow interpolation because of this website. So, but check with the local jurisdiction as well. But the website will tell you what the exact wind speed, latitude, longitude, and everything is of the project so that you would have that. So I will send, as soon as I get done with this, I will send it to Wendy and she'll make it available to everyone.
Just a quick reminder, I put Jim's contact information is back in the Q&A and the chat. And also you'll have a copy
Okay.
of his presentation material. But we'll get you what we can. But Jim's also more than happy if you want to reach out to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever way is more convenient to you, either text or email, whatever you need to do, that's fine. And I'll try, I always try and get back as quickly as possible. Sometimes I'm tied up with doing programs, um, like today, and other days I can get right back to you. So it's hit and miss. Any other questions seeing coming up there? I don't see any.
I don't see any either.
I still show 121 people,
Yeah.
so I'm giving them an opportunity. But as I said in the beginning, this is not a drastic code change year for our industry. For other industries, you'll find for perhaps in the roofing and some of these other ones, yes. But for our industry, our windows and doors were pretty much an overkill to begin with in many cases. So that's why the new standard didn't really change a whole lot. Most of our changes were either grammatical or just trying to get the commercial, in other words, a building book and the residential book saying the same things of that nature, and to try and cut down interpretation. And I apologize for misinterpretation, but it's always going to happen. We just trying to eliminate it as much as or limit it as much as possible. Now, I mentioned the ninth edition will have more substantial changes, give us a better sense of this. All I can give you, John, is what I call Jim's crystal ball. All right. Um, there's a lot of, I think we're going to see some changes in energy. What those changes are going to be, though, is largely going to be, a result of who wins the elections in November, I think. All right. Then you're also going to find, you might see some changes. So everything we read about, talk about, and then when they talk about damages or whatever, talk about winds, the wind gust speeds of the 3-second gust speeds. Well, the University of Florida actually determined there's no such thing as a 3-second gust of wind when it comes to all these standards. It's actually a fraction of a second. So once that gets a hold of the standards, are all going to have to change eventually to that. So that'll change a lot of numbers and what have you. And those are some of the things that are going to make major changes in our industry. Just a couple of them, but I foresee some major changes coming in the ninth edition. But you got 3 years to worry about that. Any other questions here I'm looking at? I don't see any popping up.
No, just
And
real quick
again,
again, while if anybody else is looking to type in their questions, just a couple reminders that I just put a link to the presentation material back in the chat, as well as a link to your attendance information that we talked about at the beginning. So again, if you want to grab those real quick before we
yeah,
finish up.
Wendy, I think that's a good thing because one of the first questions that came up when the class started, is this that 1 hour or the 2 hour class?
Right,
And I
right.
think when they're referring to is this that other code class is a requirement?
Correct. And this is not an advanced course. You do get one
Correct.
hour of HSW. So we definitely want to make sure everybody is aware of that.
Yep. And again, I got a question going. I've said this numerous times. I'll say it again: is that you guys, I'm semi-retired now, and I miss hearing from you all. So feel free to reach out and ask a question. If I don't have the answer, I'll get it for you. Right? It's that simple. And generally what I'll do is I'll go right to the code book if it's a question on code, and I'll actually print it out and send it to you so that you have it. And you can use it for your discretion, I guess. So other than that, I think I'm all set. I will send you, Wendy, uh, that website that they
Okay.
can go to get the wind speed for whatever lot they want anywhere in the state of Florida, anywhere in
Okay.
the country, actually. All
Okay.
right.
And just a couple